This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio.
Okay, and welcome back to Indie Live Radio now. And we've still got Marlon here and Sue. Sue, I think we've got you to about 1 o'clock, have we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some music you've asked us to put on, so here we go then. And what we'll do is we'll have a little chat after we play a song for you, right? And maybe talk about some of the immigration problems we've got in the US. I mean, I think we've all seen that photograph. A horrific photograph of the father, as his daughter was clinging to his back and they both drowned. You know, it seems as if you've got huge problems over there. You know, but anyway, let's...
well, thank you for choosing some of the songs I suggested.
Well, you're lucky.
Excited to hear
You're
them.
lucky we had some. But let's see, what do you think? What do you fancy? We've got Leonard Cohen, Hallelujah, James Taylor, John Baez, Dick Vaughan. How about this one? How Westland Wins.
Oh, I love Tupac and the Westland Winds. Yeah. Thank you.
I tell you what, we'll put this on and we'll come back. Okay, folks, we'll be back soon. Oops, I better switch to the right thing.
This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio.
Okay, and welcome back. That's a beautiful song.
Yeah.
So why do you like Dick Goffin so much?
Well, that's interesting. I'm trying to think of how and when I first heard his music. I think because to me, I've seen him perform 2 or 3 times live, I think both in the US, and I, of course, heard his recordings before that. Again, he has a very strong Scottish sensibility. He puts out there his the strength of his feeling, even disgust about how he feels Scotland has been treated. And when he did the song, the Victor Jara song, the Chilean folk singer, he was in that horrible stadium.
That's a shame. I wish we had that song for you.
Yeah. So it just everything about his awareness of what happens in the world, and I think the artists, the necessity of artists to wake us up and to keep us thinking about these things. So that's my view of Dick Gaughan, and I hope his health is better. I know he's been ill for a while now.
So it's quite a lot of political activists, artists. You like,
yeah. And I like artists and performers and musicians and other artists. They don't have to be completely political, but I feel like when we live in this world in the 20th and 21st century, And if you're a deep thinking person, how can you not confront some of these things? So I don't expect them to be political all the time, obviously, but I really appreciate it when it comes out in their art.
Yeah, absolutely. We were trying to play the last time, was it with Ben? I tried to play, it was actually in the Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, God Save the Queen. But we got the wrong one, didn't we?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's, that's another time. In the US, right, we see it in the TV. We've seen that photograph of the, the little, was it a little boy, little girl hanging on to her dad's back.
Yeah.
They both drowned.
Yeah. He had, I think, swum back to get her because she freaked out that her family, some were on one side of the Rio Grande, some were on the other. So he had to go back to get her, obviously, and then they both drowned.
That
was tragic.
Yes.
That's tragic.
What's the real tragedy is that sometimes we have to see these images for it to really sink in.
Yeah.
What's going on out there.
Yeah.
Words are just words, refugee, the numbers.
Yeah.
When you actually saw that, being a dad, twin girls.
And there was a
similar
occasion when, if you remember, there was a photograph of a little boy.
That's right.
On the beach at one of the Greek islands.
Yeah.
On a boat, one of these plastic, rubber boats capsized. People had all gone, and he was left, just lying. So, it's like when you see them, it was like almost, something had just been thrown carelessly into the sand, and it's awful. That had a big impact.
It did.
In Europe.
We've got a refugee crisis here in Europe, that being an example. And we've got America, people trying to get into the USA from Southern America, It's quite something at the moment, vast movements of people. Yeah. Can you hear me okay there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A little bit higher.
A little bit higher. I'll tell you what, do you know what it is? It's I need to turn this up actually. Right, give me a second and I'll try and get some volume for you. Any volume? No, any volume. I'm a bit scared because I don't want to pop your ears. I'll tell you what, I'll sort you.
That's better.
Is that a bit better?
Yeah, that's better.
All right, okay. Cool. Yes, so, I mean, talking about the US at the moment, right? People want to get into the US to get a better life, right? I'm thinking about I always think about the Second World War. You had the Marshall Plan to rebuild America, right? See, is there any way...
Well, to rebuild Europe.
To rebuild Europe.
Sorry, America.
Yeah.
Sorry. To rebuild Europe, right? And I thought, a Marshall Plan to help rebuild South America, if that's what it requires, or, you need good governance, etc. for these countries, but, maybe a more positive way to help these countries, as opposed to, at the moment, the drug trade.
Right.
That's got to be their biggest exports for some of these countries, and, that's consumers in the US that's fueling it. I don't know, what's your thoughts on this? It's such a big subject.
It is. I wish there were a good and clear way to have Americans understand our history in all of South America, and particularly in Central America from the 70s on. I'll never forget, a friend of a friend was in the Peace Corps in El Salvador. And in the mid-1970s, my friend showed me the letters she was writing. And this young woman, must have been probably 24 or 25, she laid out exactly what was happening. She was in a small village in the mountains, and she understood that the U.S. was funding these proxy fighters. And I don't even know exactly what they were doing, but she just had horrific descriptions of what was happening to the farmers in her small country area. So on the one hand, you had the U.S. bringing in the Peace Corps to support people and their development. And on the other hand, you had the U.S. funding a government which was slaughtering, creating these civil wars.
They were undermining democracy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, it did it in Chile as well.
Yeah. So when you have American people who don't know enough about this and only see and assume these are economic migrants who just want some of this pie that American working people don't feel they don't have enough of, then it becomes so easy to blame, to scapegoat, and to buy into, I don't know if they're buying into Trump's. I mean, I think the positive thing is Trump's reaction is so horrific. And every single week, I would say, as someone who worked in immigration, refugee rights and services over the past 4 years, every week of his administration, at least twice, I can think of outrageous things that he has either said, policies he has tried to create, groups that he has insulted. And fortunately, we have had so many Americans respond to that every single week, from our American Civil Liberties Union, which is, a non-governmental organization that continually sues the Trump administration and has been quite successful, to the college students. We call them dreamers or DACA students. These are kids who were brought usually by a family member when they were often toddlers. They speak U.S. English with no accent. They're working. They're in college. They are, in a way, their own best advocates. And most Americans support a pathway to citizenship for them. I mean, we've educated them in our schools.
Exactly.
They're paying
They can
taxes.
contribute
They're
to-
paying for my Social Security benefit
Yeah.
as an older person. Yeah, they are currently, and for their lives, will be contributors. And then we have, as you know, I forget the figure, if it's 12 or 14 million undocumented immigrants in the country. In Boston, I think we used to think we didn't have any undocumented immigrants. Well, I would say most of our downtown Boston office buildings, 5 o'clock, there are cadres of people who come in to clean them. And I would say most of those women are undocumented. And then another group, they have the right to stay in the country. Some of them have been here for 20 or more years from places like Haiti, some of the African nations, and some Central American, where the government has deemed that for either war or natural disasters, it's too dangerous for them to return. And I'd say the U.S. government, by continuing to grant them the right to stay for over 20 years, has effectively said, this is now your home.
Yeah.
This is where you live and contribute. Instead of Donald Trump saying, I'm going to end that December 31st of 2019. So they are just, constantly on the edge of their seats, not knowing what's going to happen. And many of them, our immigrant population starts more small businesses and more retail operations than native-born Americans. You probably know this. We have other more high-placed, educated immigrants who've started major American corporations. So essentially, we have supposedly a business-friendly government that wants to toss these people out, shut these places down, not to mention, as I think might have happened in Scotland the last couple of years, the people who pick our crops. Immigrants are at every level of the job sector in the U.S. and tremendously impact the U.S. economy. I would love to see our American businesses become more vocal. That's actually an area I'm going to do a little work on when I return this summer, is sort of demonstrating to business in a way how little it would take for them to express what most of them are thinking behind the scenes, but just they haven't, as a coalition group come out and said, this would be devastating for our American economy for these reasons.
I mean, I really appreciate hearing that. It doesn't get that sort of information about the kind of, fairly large-scale, protests that people will write in, or immigrant, groups that will kind of take them to court even. That doesn't get reported very much over here. It does a bit, but not too much. Why do you think that people, why is it then that those you were mentioning businesses there who could come up, it wouldn't take much for them to say, look, this is a really good thing. Why do they keep quiet?
There are a few kind of recently formed progressive business associations that have started to tackle this issue. Unfortunately, there are a number of corporate leaders who are quite conservative, who are Republicans. We have, I'm trying to remember, Home Depot is now getting boycotted because it came out that the CEO and the owner is funding Trump's new campaign, and there's several others as well. So, I don't know. The irony here is that everything from large, chicken processing plants in North Carolina to big machine shops in the Midwest, these are places that have huge numbers of mostly immigrant workers, and when they get raided, that shuts down their business. And I have not understood myself why they feel, or whether it's simply this constant intertangledness of American business and American Republican government over the decades. I really don't understand. I mean, certainly at this point, it seems to me it should be much more acceptable for any of these business leaders
I
to
can
join
understand
together
it.
and speak out.
I can understand it a bit now, with a few years into Trump's tenure, because he pushes that whole fear, hate, disinformation to his voter base. The people who let's say genuinely do feel left behind.
Right.
But then the blame's put into the wrong place. So I can sort of understand that he's been very, very successful in promoting that discourse, let's face it. So then it does make it harder for a business to come out and oppose that, because
Good point, Marlene.
because people will stop. Well, some people will start using them, but other people will stop using them.
And I should not ignore or discount that. I mean, that's why I think at times Donald Trump ramps up his rhetoric.
Yes.
Because he's getting that feed. He's being fed by his base. And I can only assume that for business, it's similar, particularly in certain sections of the country, parts of the South, parts of the Midwest, where, think about major corporate interests. They don't have to answer to the American who's getting paid, less than $12 an hour, which would be about £8 or £9. We haven't had a federal minimum wage increase in so long. Most of our states now have a minimum wage which is set quite a bit higher than the federal minimum. So if they are silent on what Trump is doing around immigration and refugees, then I can only assume that they consider that this is going to keep their bottom line safe, and there will not be pressure. Well, also, if you have an immigrant workforce, particularly an undocumented one, you can pay them whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can not give them the benefits. So there must be any number of, quote, good reasons to be silent.
I mean, over here, we certainly get reported what Mr. Trump's doing, and we'll get reported now that the Democrats have the House, Congress, we get that reported. So there's quite a lot of that, and then we'll get reported what the Senate will kind of say, but we just don't get much more than that. So I get left with two impressions. Well, one is, why on earth why have the Republican Party let themselves be ambushed by him like this?
Yeah.
Because surely some of those Republican politicians, senators, even congressmen, don't agree with what he's doing, but people don't.
You wonder why they're not more horrified.
Yeah.
He's taken over the Republican Party
Absolutely.
with that kind of fascist type.
I know there's big money involved. There's big money involved in American politics. Not that there isn't money involved in British politics, but not to the same extent. So there's a lot of money in there, and then they want the rewards from that, whether it's policies that deny climate change, or they roll back the Obama kind of improvements about air pollution and water pollution and everything. So there's big money involved. I understand that, but sometimes it seems that one of the bright areas is every now and again over here you hear how Trump's tried to do something and the federal courts have said, no, you can't do that. That's good.
And it's, to me, there's also a frightening aspect to that, because we have many now judicial appointees from George Bush Jr.'s era who are quite conservative, plus Trump has been able to appoint many more judges, I believe, than Obama, because most of Obama's appointments, even at the sort of spread throughout the country levels of the judiciary, were blocked by the
Republicans.
Senate and House, right. And because, as we know, the Republicans still control the American Senate, no longer the House. I think that what the American media seems to have for an explanation is that Republicans are so afraid that this base, this, angry base, will turn against them, and therefore they will lose their elected position, plus to carry out their whole Republican agenda, they need to support Trump, right or wrong. I mean, possibly that's all too simplistic, but...
Well, possibly it's too simplistic, but actually it's kind of what's happening in the Conservative Party in Britain at the moment. Like, they want to hang on to power, and, so they're prepared to vote for, well, we'll find out tomorrow, but it looks like they're prepared to vote for a guy who wings it most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's intelligent and he's well educated and everything, but he isn't a top-notch politician, and yet he's got a certain public, facade. It's almost that he character that he's built up. He's done that quite deliberately, and they're prepared to go with him for the sake of he'll be the one who's most likely to keep us in power.
Wow. Do you think? And who knows if this really was operating with Trump, but there was this whole belief that Donald Trump really didn't want to be president, really never expected the outcome. Do you think Boris Johnson, does he have any of that, where he never expected?
Oh, no.
No, he wasn't.
No.
Okay.
He's probably thought he should be prime minister from when he was at Eton.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a lot, to raise his profile, he's done a lot of TV shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trump, his TV show. Right, so, that's how he's managed to up his profile, coming across this kind of,
bit of a buffoon. Man of the people.
Everybody's friend, go for a, beer and cricket and all that kind of stuff. But
what do you think's going to happen when he comes? Is it Dundee he's going to visit?
Well, brave man if he goes to Dundee.
That'll be fun.
That'll be fun.
The milkshakes could be flying.
That got a lot of press in the U.S. media, all the milkshakes. Because I think there were some American protesters who tried it with Trump.
Is that
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, going back to the thing about having, your judiciary.
I tell you what, right, we'll have a little break here because we'll get Woody Guthrie coming up and my break note's running out, right? So,
good.
Woody Guthrie, This Land Is Your Land. How's that? Good?
Great.
Yeah.
You like it? Okay, we'll listen to this and we'll come back, all right?
This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio.
Okay.
The way that I understand there's a
back.
Supreme
It's
Court.
minority control.
We are back. Took us all by surprise there. Okay, so Marla,
Yeah,
you were
I
gonna-
was just before we stopped to listen to Woody Guthrie. I was just about to pick up on Sue's comment about the judiciary in the States, and here I am. I'm about to expound on it, and I know very little except that there you have the Supreme Court. Judges are nominated for life, or presumably they can retire, but that's up to them. They're nominated by the current president, and then of course they have to get through the Senate and the House, I assume. But it's kind of pretty scary to think now that with the way that the judiciary in the Supreme Court stacks up, there might be a majority against Wade versus Roe, which was the kind of that was the case that made abortion available in.
Yes.
I mean, it probably was more than just
I think in the
abortion,
early
but that's what
70s.
it's
so
remembered
that's
for.
under threat, isn't it?
It's under threat.
Or it's been.
It absolutely is. In fact, states, more conservative states, or I shouldn't say conservative states, states that have conservative legislatures have been able to whittle away at a woman's right to not just abortion, but to overall health care by taking funding from women's health clinics, especially Planned Parenthood, which does a lot more than abortions, and have been able to create kind of false parameters around abortion, ignoring things like forcing a woman to carry to term a child which is going to die on its first breath because it has severe physical issues. And they somehow managed to, for a certain segment of the U.S. population, control the discussion and once again blame the woman. And that's what's really interesting to me in the U.S. There's very little talk about the role of a man in procreation. It's all the woman.
Well, there was that. I mean, I think it didn't actually. In the end, it was stopped. But there was that. It was shocking. It seemed to be a woman who'd been shot, and she was pregnant. The baby died, and she was possibly going to be charged and prosecuted for manslaughter.
Yeah.
I think, well, it was a guy who pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the end it didn't go through, but even the fact that could be
even talking about it is bad enough. That's just insane.
Well, right now, and this has gotten very dramatic in the past year, there are many states now where there are no healthcare providers who can provide abortion. Some of them because they've been so threatened. Yeah. Most is because of legislatively what these states have done, the state legislatures, which means that you have women who would have to fly to another state. Plus, you have those in other states who have now lessened the period of time during which a woman could make that determination, to the point where a woman may not even realize that she's pregnant yet, but she's already lost that 6 or 8 week period. Wow. So, quote, they have done everything they can to make it virtually impossible. In many states, and I wish I had the number just before I came over, I read that, and it was incredible. I've been like 30 states, some very high number.
So just to let you know, right, you said, do you need to depart at 1 o'clock, or can you stay a bit longer? It's up to you.
I could stay a bit longer.
Right, okay. No problem.
I mean, you guys are going to be getting bored of my...
No, not at all.
No, we haven't got into climate change yet.
No, we haven't started it. I'll tell you what it is, right? I've got to set up these break notes that allows us to chat, right? And we've got about 45 seconds left in this one, right? Now, I still want to... I was just in case you were going to go, I was wanting you to listen to a bit of James Taylor because I've set it up for you, right? So I'll tell you what.
A good Massachusetts man.
There you go. We'll put on a bit of James Taylor. You've got a friend, right? And... after that, right, we're coming up to the news, so we might let the songs go on. And If you can stay a bit longer,
Sure.
maybe to quarter past, half past.
Yeah,
what?
no, I'd like to.
Right, all right, excellent. Okay, we'll get another break now.
I didn't realize I'd enjoy this so much.
There you go. It's pretty good, isn't it? So we've got a countdown to James Taylor. I'll whack him on now, right? And we can have a little break after the news, okay? Right, folks, we'll be back soon.
This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio.
Okay, welcome back. So, Sue, tell me, what's next in your plans?
Well, can I actually tell you a little bit about what I did here in Scotland over the past 6 weeks?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So I started off in Glasgow for a couple of days, and I wandered around the city, which I also, now that I'm back here, have done some more of. And I've noticed there are, for me, a lot of parallels between my city, Boston, and Glasgow. There are many interesting, older, even historic buildings in Glasgow, but only interspersed with much more contemporary structures. And sort of unlike Edinburgh, to me, it feels that, and I might be wrong, there wasn't quite a bit of thought that went into what to tear down and what it would do to certain neighborhoods and communities. And parts of Boston have been treated like that. So that's been kind of interesting. I thought I would find more kind of working class neighborhoods of, the rows of flats, stone flats buildings that I love walking around and getting a sense of the whole community and the environment. So I haven't really quite experienced that in Glasgow.
I think Govan would have been the place, but they've revamped Govan as well, which it's not far from here at all. A lot of the houses were pulled down and redevelopment done, but it definitely needed it. Yeah, it was. They had to replace all that housing.
On the other hand, Glasgow people are really easy to meet and wonderful to spend time with. So I have felt really relaxed and comfortable moving around the city. Last night, I got myself lost and I didn't realize the subway shut at 6 o'clock. Oh, and I was in this area. I don't even know where it was.
Sundays? Wow.
It was pretty desolate, deserted area. But I was able to just keep asking any passerby, how do I get, the next few blocks of where I'm going? And my phone was dying as well. But it was, it was fine. And I started, once I left Glasgow, I wanted to come back to Scotland for a whole bunch of reasons. Obviously there's the political, social, and reconnecting with old friends. And also to see if there's a way I, at some point, could spend at least part of each year in Scotland. That's a whole other topic. And part of it was I had become intrigued with the number of archaeological digs that happen throughout Scotland, particularly, up north and in the Orkneys. And the Orkneys is a place I'd never experienced. So I didn't have a sense of, the Norse influence. You always read about Shetland and the Orkneys and that, and how they regard themselves in Orkney as Orcadians first and maybe Scottish second. So there's ways that one can volunteer, even as an international person with no experience in archaeology whatsoever. And it took 3 years, but they finally accepted me. So I went up to mainland in the Orkneys and on South Ronaldsay. For a week, I got to be part of a wonderful dig at a place called the Cairns. Oh my God. And the site director, the professor, Martin Carruthers, he and his wife and the other staff were just tremendous. They had about 40 to 50 people on site at this dig. And, there's professional archaeologists and researchers, and then there's the postdocs and the grads, and then there's the undergrads, and then there's us, just sort of measly 10 volunteers, most of them my age. And Martin spent a lot of time with us. He was so excited by what they call findings, that if he found, an antler that had been carved into a handle for a knife, he'd run over with it. If they found a rock that they could tell had been used to, chip away at something else. And we kept having these, we were working in an area which had just been uncovered, sort of a newly revealed area. But we would constantly be given tours deep down into the bowels of this Broch itself, which has basically every living era of history reflected. It has Neolithic at the bottom, and then Iron Age, and then the Picts, and then the Norse Vikings, and then more contemporary farms. So it was fascinating. Plus, the location. I had to keep popping up every hour and take photographs of the ocean and the coves. And we were high up on a bluff looking out over the sea, and you could see North Mainland of Scotland in the distance on a clear day. Oh, and the weather. I never shed my long johns the whole time. And this was late June. Gloves, hat, the whole 9 yards.
But it is amazing, that archaeology up there on the Orkneys. And I mean,
it's a hot spot, isn't it?
It is, it's a hot spot. And actually, there have been some really, really good, there are some really, really good archaeology programmes that BBC put out. And, it makes you, when they kind of describe that whole settlement, especially when you go back to, say, Ring of Brodgar times, that Orkney was at the centre of things. I mean, it predates Stonehenge.
Yeah.
And Orkney was at the centre of things. We think of Orkney's away out on the edge, you can't get to it. But when you're in the centre of things, because people go everywhere by, if they go by boat, then it's a completely different way of looking at the place. Actually,
Absolutely.
one of the programmes then what they did was they turned a map of Britain upside down,
On its
as
head.
it were, on its head.
Yeah.
And then you could see, well, the Faroes weren't far away, Iceland wasn't far away, Norway, Shetland was just close by, Norway's not too far. Brilliant, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Well, part of Martin's theory is that each Brock community could see the next one, and that they had ways of communicating, so that most of those islands were kind of fully populated,
Yeah,
massively populated.
yeah.
So it was fascinating. So there was that part of my trip, really, for me, to learn and to have that level of new learning and excitement, and then getting back, down into mainland Scotland. I got to go to Mull and Iona, 2 islands which I have loved over the decades, and I noticed things about the natural landscape in Scotland and all of the tree planting that's happened. And if I was here 45 years ago, those trees in Mull may have been awfully wee, or maybe they hadn't even been planted yet. So I seem to remember Mull as this kind of like the Highlands, these windswept moors and high mountains with endless views. And there's a lot more forest there than I remember. So it was interesting to observe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And there's a big Yes group up Orkney. Yes,
Yeah.
Scott.
Very
Yes, Orkney.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you talk any politics up there, or was it all
I
hush
did a
hush?
bit. Yeah. No, good reactions. Again, we were so busy with the dig for 8 hours a day, and the restaurants up there closed pretty early, so I didn't have a lot of nighttime social activity. But definitely the folks, the archaeologists, the folks staffing were very pro independence.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's voted no that area, didn't it?
Did it?
Well, you know what? Also,
Well,
I
they certainly keep voting for Lib Dems.
Yeah.
I also feel that I've noticed, and I don't want to be speaking out of turn, in Thurso and parts of the north coast, and then on the islands, I heard a lot of English accents. So it made me wonder, are there more English families who've settled in those areas? Maybe they've always been there. And I wondered if that could influence some of the politics as well.
There are. I mean, there are all over Scotland, but I don't think you can assume, maybe not so much anyway, you can't assume that because someone was born over the border
Right.
that they haven't come round to vote.
Yeah, especially if they've lived here for a
Well,
while.
we've got English Scots for Yes, and they do regular work with Indie Live Radio, But I think there's about 500,000. I don't know. Jan would know, or Ray
That's a
Indie
good
It was the
Remember?
case in 2014 that there were a lot of people born in England living in Scotland who voted yes, but there were more who voted no than the general population. But my guess would be that that's shifting again.
Yeah, I know. So it's,
My husband's going to vote yes this time anyway.
oh, thank goodness. So where else did you go, Sue?
So let's see. After Mull and Iona, I crossed over to Dundee, and
Yes, Floating City, of course.
I finally had a few nights there, and just wandered around the city, and again, met many, particularly young, very friendly, helpful folks, and had some good pub experiences. Although I have to say, beer and ale, maybe I just wasn't choosing the right brands. I feel like I had wonderful ales back in the 70s and 80s when I was here, and I wasn't finding the same. It's almost as though what's happened at home, and I know my brethren at home love this. We have so many small independent breweries now, and they manufacture a lot of IPAs, which I think are a bit different in the U.S. compared to here. And I just, I love British beer so much that I must have missed the right
I think
breweries.
that there has been quite a rise in small breweries that that are doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe you went to the wrong bar.
I probably did. Yeah,
You
I
went to
didn't
the
have
wrong
enough
bar.
people
You
to,
went to the wrong
steer me
bar.
in the right.
But
Next time.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. Next time.
Oh, and then, I can't leave without mentioning this. So then I crossed the River Tay and stayed with very dear friends from university days, Billy Kay and his lovely wife, Joanne, originally from Portugal. And really, Billy has been a big influence on my perspective, both on Scottish history and culture and literature and music and Scottish independence, because he and I have kept in touch. He does a lot of research and writing and radio programs on kind of the Scottish links to other areas of the world. And he's been to the States countless times, and I've had the pleasure of driving him around to interview grandchildren of Scottish working fellows who designed golf courses back at the beginning of the 20th century, and other different work that he's been doing to make those links and really expand those links for Scots here, their knowledge of their influence in the rest of the world. So I had a delightful visit with them, and they always take me around and bring me to new places in Fife that I've never been to.
Well, there's somebody we actually need to interview as well, Billy Kay.
Yeah.
Yeah, give him a shout at some point.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've a good trip around Scotland.
Yeah, and then I ended up just before returning to Glasgow in Edinburgh for a week. And Edinburgh for me in Scotland is my first love. I love, I don't know, I feel like in Glasgow and Edinburgh, you know how aromas evoke so much? And in both cities, I still smell the brewing hops of
in
the
Edinburgh
breweries.
you do,
We don't ever smell
Some
that in the
smell.
U.S. anymore. And I swear, do people still burn coal? I think I smell this other aroma from the 1970s. So
Maybe, I don't know, I never there's some
bit.
places
Yeah,
up
a
there
little
that...
bit.
and in Edinburgh,
Yeah.
I got to meet with a housing advocacy group. This is the other work I did before I got involved in immigration rights, was housing advocacy. And it's a group that had been trying to save a block building on Leith Walk, right down in Leith itself, just a 2 or 3 story building, a beautiful reddish, none of it's sandstone. It looks more like a Glasgow building than an Edinburgh building, where a developer was going to develop it into student flats for Edinburgh University. But they had successfully lobbied the Edinburgh Council to not allow that to happen. But then I guess there's a next step where you can bring in a convener who's a civil servant who has the right to actually overturn
Yeah.
the council's decision, and that's happened. So they're at the stage now of the cafe shut last weekend. I met them in the pub restaurant,
this
which
to
is
keep
shutting
the-
in
to keep
October.
the structure of
It's a whole
this-
block
Right.
structure. Yeah, and it's very sad because whatever's going to happen isn't slated to happen till October, but they basically tossed out all the small businesses on the first and second floor and the ground retail establishments. And so that it was good to hear the amount of grassroots support and how they had developed that, because that's something that we tried to do in Boston. We're still facing really a crisis of people being evicted from their apartments, from their flats in Boston, families who've been there 20, 30 years, where
Jeez.
developers are purchasing the buildings because now people like me from the suburbs who are about to retire want to move back into the city of Boston because it's become more desirable. So these, what were once lower income and mostly minority occupied neighborhoods, are kind of losing the ability financially for those families to stay in their home community. So I wanted to hear how Leith is confronting that.
Okay, well, we're just coming up to a little break here, and we're going to have John Baez. It's a favourite of yours.
Can
is
I
it?
correct you? It's pronounced Baez.
Baez. It's a Scottish.
He's young.
it's a
He's too
Scottish-
young. He doesn't really know.
I apologise. Okay, here we go then. Hello, and we're back. We're back. We're back in the pre. That song didn't last long. Oh dear. Okay, we've got a phone call to do, folks. So what I'm going to do is give you another song, and we'll be back soon.
I'm not hearing Kevin, but is that because he's
Hang on, just try.
Hello and welcome back. Now I'm going to be calling Lynn Lynn Copeland from Garrick Women for Change. Hopefully she will answer, and this is to talk about the NHS. So just give me a second. Let's give her a call. Right. Let's see if Lynn answers. I know she's busy, so it could be that she's not going to answer here. She does have something on after this. Let's see if she answers. Lynn, can you answer, please? I think we've missed her. All right, okay. I'll give it one more shot.
Hi, you're through to Lynn Copeland. Sorry I can't take your call at the moment.
I tell you what, we'll just leave that for the time being. All right, we'll have a quick listen to Amy MacDonald to gather our thoughts, and we'll be back. That's the weeks.
This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio.
Yeah, that was the weeks there. I got in a bit of a mix there. Too much happening at the one time there. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll try and give Lynn a call at another time.
Yeah.
Because it sounds real interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it would be good to hear from her. I got an email about a workshop that, that she's obviously trying to set up, a series of them over in Scotland, just to educate people more about, well, the dangers that, you know, Brexit poses to Scottish Health Service. But in particular, I know that she mentioned the part that when Westminster was taking back powers from the devolved governments, Wales and Scotland and presumably Ireland, Northern Ireland as well, one of the ones they took back was procurement for the NHS. So it's not the NHS, Scottish Health Service is still within the remit of Holyrood, but they took back the powers for procurement. Basically, that's procurement is who you buy from and what you pay.
Right.
And that was the motivation for that is presumably because, the Brexiteers are trying to set up what they refer to as a single UK market, which they will then be negotiating trade deals for.
Right.
And that's a big danger for the health service if procurement goes to American companies, and it's part of trade deal on the table with a trade deal. That's a big thing. So it'd be really good to get her on to talk about it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm just skimming the surface there, but
Yeah. Well, what we'll do is we'll give her we'll drop her a message again, and let her know she was busy. It was a very tight call, and I completely forgot about it. And if it wasn't for you, Marlon, would have totally forgot about it. So
I'll send you the bill then.
it's but we will. That is a really super important thing. So we will talk to, and of course they're absolutely neutral. It's not to do with independence. They're neutral, right? So it's just with the NHS and the effects of it. So that'll be really good. Right, where were we before we get totally?
I was
myself up?
waxing, just
Orkney.
glowingly
We were in
about
Orkney.
my whole Scotland trip, and here I am, the day before I'm to leave, fly back tomorrow morning.
Is it tomorrow morning?
It is, yeah. So I really want to thank both of you and the whole Indie Live radio team here
Oh,
for
not a problem.
noticing my responses to your tweets and inviting me on. Really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot too. And I realize how much more I have to learn about Scotland and the indie movement. And
that's what is there to learn? Support Scottish independence.
yeah,
Just
right.
do your best. Do you think you'd come back and help us out at all?
Oh my God,
Next Indie Ref?
I really hope to, because to me, there, the all under one banner parades and rallies, things like that, I find so important, because one thing again that happened after Trump was elected, I would say the day of his inaugural was the first National Women's March in the U.S., and there were millions and millions of people. I remember
Fantastic.
I was standing on a street lined up to march. We'd already had 2 hours of speeches and the whole Boston Common. I have never seen it packed. I actually suffered from sort of claustrophobia in the crowd. I've never experienced that. So lining up on the street, it took 45 minutes for our group to be able to move in this parade. So getting people together where we can see there are so many who are so concerned and who are supportive for a certain action and a certain response, I think for the indie movement is really important, particularly during when you've gone through this extended period through no fault of your own, where the rest of Britain, England is trying to decide about Brexit, and you're just kind of left
ignored,
hanging.
Really, apart from the
So
energy, resources, food, drinking, etc.
Yeah. So that's all a long way around me saying that.
Yeah.
While I couldn't participate in something active for Scottish independence now, I really want to be able to do that in the future. And again, part of it is for me to learn the range of people's perspectives, their hopes and dreams, their fears, their ideas and methods for how to create a society that works for everyone. How to make sure that universities are affordable, that healthcare is there for all of us, that our resources are doing the best for our nation and our people. So I still have a lot to experience and learn here. And, I didn't return to Scotland for, I think, 25 years. And I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah.
I want to keep coming back and find a way. I get very agitated when I come back and I'm simply a tourist. So it's really hard for me to hear someone say, "Oh yeah, you're American," when they recognize my accent, because after a while, I know I don't blend in, but I almost feel like I'm becoming part of your community. And I kind of want to continue as an American to find ways to be able to support, assist, and experience that. I think also because there must be something for me that's appealing about, even though Scotland seems vast to me, and over 5 million people is a huge number, there's something different for me here. I feel as though people here can have more of a direct impact than we reasonably can at home in the U.S. So I would love to. Democracy is the damn hardest system anywhere to work on, to succeed at. And yet, to me, it's the only one that's worth living under. I mean, it means that you have to have small groups of people in every neighborhood, in every region, council, in every county, in every part of the country, who are expressing their point of view, who are being listened to, and then who are arriving at some kind of consensus that people can then live with and live with each other over. And so I'm sort of excited about the prospect of how that plays out in Scotland. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Do you
on
think that system, because in a way you have that in America, don't you? Have a, well, I know Sue's just pulled a face, folks. So, you have state. I mean, some states are bigger, like California. It's not the only one, but would be more than a viable country on its own. So you've got states that have got, and they've got a lot of their own, of course they've all got their own legislator, and then above that you've got the federal layer.
Right.
Do you think that just doesn't work then in terms of providing the kind of feeling of taking your own decisions that you were saying?
That's probably a bigger kind of humankind issue. Is democracy truly viable and manageable? And maybe even more serious, is democracy possible under the kind of capitalist system that we have in the US, where that profit motive will always come into play, and some people will always defer to, the corporate point of view? And I don't know. It's very interesting to me, because we in the US are so averse, as you hear all the time, to anything that's labeled socialism, even if we have a number of systems that, whether it's healthcare, whether it's our education system, whatever it is, if you call it socialist, or if somebody sticks that label on it, it becomes a death knell. And
well, it's interesting that, because in a one way, there's a positive side to that, which is that people value being self-sufficient. But the other side of it is a sort of nonsense. Don't want to help folk who just genuinely, need help, really. And I suppose in the States, you've basically got a two-party system. No one else ever seems to. I know there are some independents, but no one else really ever seems to kind of break into that. Whereas if you look at the way that, say, the EU works in the EU Parliament, there are all sorts of different parties. They've got a voting system that helps them gain seats, even though we sometimes would rather they didn't, but they do, from left wing right over to right wing kind of views about how to run countries. And then those parties form blocks of mutual interest, and then that builds up within the European Parliament. That seems quite a good way of keeping diversity as well as people.
I'm going to jump in here just to let you know, right? I'll let you listen to this. It's Phantom Power, and it's Journey to Yes. Erin, a young activist here called Erin, right? And this is quite interesting, right? I'll come back to it in 20 seconds. In fact, okay, I've got longer to explain. Phantom Power is this guy that does videos, right? And he does really important stuff for the independence movement, and he's covered lots of people who went from no to yes, right? The journey to yes, and this is one coming up. So you'll find this quite interesting, I would think.
And it still feels like that because I still can't vote, which is really, really annoying because I'm politically engaged. I do politics almost every single day, and I feel so strong about issues, but I can't make any input and I can't make any change. In 2014, I was 12, 13. I looked into it and I actually did a few surveys, and I got so much no, and I thought maybe I should just be no, and maybe that's the choice. It took me till after the independence referendum to really feel so strong for a yes vote, because At that age, I felt like I could engage in politics.
I joined the SNP on the 23rd of October 2015.
In the next Scottish referendum, which I hope will come, I know I'll be able to vote because the SNPU values my voice, and that is a great form of empowerment for me and all the other 16 to 17-year-olds across the country. In independence referendum 2014, the turnout was 75% for 16 plus, so it's relatively low, and with so much up for stakes, it's so important that we engage, because it's been shown that the upper class, middle class vote more than the working class, and party policy can steer towards the people they want to win their votes from. By not voting, we're not getting a whole view from everybody else. We can't moan if you don't vote. I think the barriers for people at that age is you have no one to really relate to. A lot of politicians are older. It can just sound like you're at school, like you're just being spoken at you and you don't feel included. Also, barriers are sources of information. You don't know what's reliable on social media, to be completely honest. Just understanding and knowing what the implications are, because there are a lot of unanswered questions from both sides. What the Tories are right now is they're proposing themselves as to be the progressive right, and what they really are is a new UKIP. And what the Tories are proposing is a small, closed UK. What Theresa May has said has just been all pretty dire. I think the Brexit vote is pretty sad for Scotland, really. I feel like Scotland's just going to be more and more suppressed. We're not valued as an equal member. I think it's particularly depressing that young people are losing out in great things. You know, the single market is a great mechanism for young people, and you have such an uncertain future. I think the opportunity that we once felt was there is not there anymore, and the horizons have definitely narrowed. Some of my friends are really nervous about the prospects for the future. They're thinking about how is this going to impact me? What's the benefits? What's the disadvantages? None of my friends were pro-Brexit. It has moved them to being more yes, and I think that's really important, because they will be the next 16-year-old category to vote in the next referendum. It's important that we start convincing them now, because the next referendum will be vital for Scotland. It's about safeguarding Scotland now and not letting it go downhill with the UK. I think the most important thing to say to the older generation is it's our future, it's my future that's in your hands. I want to see myself in an inclusive Scotland. I want to see an inclusive world. I don't want to see a closed off UK. I'll be 16 in September and I'm voting yes.
Well, that was
Great
really
hope.
good, wasn't
That's
it?
enough
Yeah.
to make you
Wow, I
great.
nearly had a tear in my eye there. I was like,
That's the
jeez.
kind of
She's
kids
not
we
even
need,
16.
you know.
Wow.
Sorry for calling you a kid, but, you know, that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Young woman.
Really
Good.
quite moving, that, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
It's
I mean,
very moving, actually.
Yeah.
you know,
It's,
if that doesn't inspire you, you know, pensioners for Indy, you know, wee lassie there.
Yeah.
It's that was really good. What did you think of it? Sue?
Oh
What
my
was your-
God, great hope there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so articulate.
absolutely.
I mean, the fact that she started researching before the last referendum,
Yeah.
just 12, and her thoughts about, you know, her friends, her peers, and what they want for their future. Yeah.
I mean, Brexit's really changed. It's a game changer. And of course, I don't know if you know this, Sue, but one of the big things that came from the No campaign during the independence referendum was that the only way to guarantee you staying in the EU was to vote no, right?
I remember reading that.
Right, so that was one of the big things, you know, and here we are. Also, you know, it was, it's, you know, what can you do? The other thing is, like with, we've been told we don't have a mandate for another referendum, but we do because that's what the SNP get in their, their, what do you call it again? That thing, they get voted in on that, like if there's circumstances.
If circumstances,
change,
if there was a material change in
like getting pulled out of the EU, that would
being
trigger.
pulled out of the EU.
And I remember reading that at the time too.
Yes,
so now,
I mean, they got that, and then and plus they have a majority for independence in Holyrood when they
Right,
link up
yeah.
with the Greens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to mention having 34, 35 MPs down in London out of 69, so more than half. And as Mrs. Thatcher once said, if the Scots vote a majority of independent supporting MPs, then they would have the right to be independent.
So they're absolutely petrified of losing Scotland. Petrified. Remember, we're storing the nuclear weapons. We've got the biggest nuclear weapons up in Western Europe, 30 miles from where we're sitting. Yeah. And the food and drink industry, some of the top universities, we'll get everything.
oil.
I didn't even mention that. Green energy. Green energy
is a more important one. Now, oil's still going to be needed, but
most
of it's gone.
They're petrified of losing Scotland. Then you the seat in the Security Council. Right? So they'll lose this big chunk. Will they keep that? It's a medium-sized country. Will they be able to retain that seat in the Security Council? There's a lot to play here.
And then imagine the dynamic if Scotland's in the EU and England and Wales and Northern Ireland aren't.
Well, apparently they're just going to, that would be catastrophic for us because they're our biggest market. And you think, well, what are you saying? Are you saying you're going to stop buying Scottish gas, oil, electricity? It's going to stop drinking whiskey, gin.
It's part of Project Fear.
It is.
Right, and these are the things that the Senate, pushed on us. Project Fear was incredible to be in.
Yeah.
This whirlwind of negativity that was going on, and
it'll be worse next time.
It'll be worse.
It'll be worse next time. But and another thing is, it's kind of like we're your biggest market, and what a danger there would be if you go independent. You think, well, hang on, we might not be immediately in the EU. That's only for technical reasons. We would be very quickly into EFTA and EEC. So being a single market, that means that whatever arrangements England has with the EU will apply to Scotland if we're in the single market. So they can't just start picking and choosing or refusing to having us access or putting tariffs on. That isn't going to be possible because they would be going against the EU agreement.
And, the UK is going to drop into WTO trade rules, right, when we get kicked out of the EU, right, because you've got to make up all these new, trade agreements with everybody again. Right, it's all been done. And
we're really good at doing that, as the last 2.5 years have shown.
Yeah, best in that. Dear God, our negotiating skills, not the best. So it's crucial for the next generation. We get out.
Yeah, and it's great to hear someone, she's going to be 16 in September, who's already able to articulate that. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
I just hope that she goes and talks to her granny and granddad.
She needs to talk. She needs to talk
to her grandparents and make sure that they're on board with her.
Absolutely, we need to replicate young Erin.
Yeah.
That's very, very hopeful, and I love these clips that Phantom Power has done. They're really good, short little clips, and what we've done is to grab the audio from them and we put them out in the radio.
Oh, good.
And so they get every 8 hours. It'll randomly select from 20. I think it's 23 we've got.
Yeah.
Marlon,
Wow, that's a lot.
So that's really good. Now listen, I want to play you another song, right? Okay, Scott. Do you know Scott McKenzie?
Familiar name, but I don't know if I do.
It was JJ that he does regular nighttime music spots for us, right? And he's I don't know why, but he gave us this as I put up Scott McKenzie, San Francisco. Be sure to. What's that going to be sure to wear a flower or something in your hair?
Yeah, flower in your hair.
Classic song.
Should we put it on for a bit of joy?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is good, isn't it? I like
Hopeful energy.
this. Energy, exactly. Let's stick this on, and that'll leave us with 10 minutes to go. I know you said you were going at 1 o'clock.
No,
and here you
actually,
are. You might as
two's
well
fine.
you might as well stay.
Yeah,
Yeah?
might as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
You've kept me well caffeinated.
Good,
So.
good stuff. Right, so here we go. Everybody's favourite song, I would say, for the 60s.
This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio. This is IndieLive.radio. Unfortunately, we cannot legally live stream music. Tune in to IndieLive.radio for audio.
Well, that was a bit tight for time there. I managed to get that break note up. So there you go. That was a great song there. And we've got 7 minutes to go. So tell me, Sue, you're back home tomorrow, right? And do you get a little break before you get back into your activism or your work? Or?
Yeah, I will. I'll take this rest of this week and the weekend to just settle back in before I start going. Yeah.
So what's the next big political activist thing that you're going to be concentrating on?
Yeah, well, this is what I didn't tell you is I actually, another reason I could be here for so many weeks right now is I was laid off from my job back in the winter.
Oh.
Which is actually, it's fine. It kind of needed to happen right now. I need to figure out my next big thing. So what I'm going to do, I was the director of development and doing a lot of fundraising and grants management for the immigration group. And I want to get more into the literal activism piece of it. So for instance, I've just learned that there's this a network of churches throughout the U.S. And we've all heard of this, but there's actually one in my hometown of Newton, Mass. And I'm going to get myself down as someone who, they have to be staffed 24/7. And in case ICE shows up. immigration customs enforcement. So I'm going to get trained and be one of the people who will do some of that.
good.
There's a huge group of people who do that. But, you know, that's become much more serious now that we see how much ICE is targeting families, and then for collateral damage, if you just happen to be in the home, even if you're not on their list, but they discover you're undocumented or they suspect you are, they will sweep you in too. And there's actually a prison, probably just 7 miles from my home, that we also learned in the last year is housing mostly undocumented men before they see an immigration judge and before they get deported. They're all kind of slated for deportation. So we've been organizing churches and other social action groups every Sunday to stand on a highway overpass, actually, a pedestrian walkway over the highway that looks onto the bank of windows. And the undocumented folks inside come to the windows and they have signs, you know, say hope or we love you or thanks for being there. So we want to give them some hope. We also are helping lawyers get inside to, you know, work with them on their cases. So there's that going on. So there's a lot of these active things. And then to try to figure out how to keep people engaged and feeling hopeful and feeling that they can continue to put out some level of energy, because, you know, after 2.5 years, people are really starting to just kind of want to go back into their cave and hope it all goes away. So there's that. And then I mentioned a friend of mine has invited me to write a couple of blog posts on the role of business. So I'm going to start talking to some these progressive business leaders I mentioned earlier and find out how we can reach out to other businesses about their role in these outcomes. So some of that.
Really interesting, isn't it?
Makes you tired just hearing you.
And we've asked you to be our
US correspondent.
US correspondent.
On your live radio.
Yeah. So
You should get us to do a jingle.
Aye.
American accent.
We should.
Yeah.
Right, after this, right, if we can hold you for another 5 minutes, we'll get you to do a little jingle for us.
I've never been asked to do a jingle for anyone on anything, so that would be fun.
Excellent. Okay. Well, just to let you know, we've got maybe about another 3 minutes left, and it's the English Scots for Yes podcast is on after this.
Oh, good.
Right, so, and I've got to, this is where it gets tricky, right? This is where it gets tricky for me, right? We're live streaming this, right? I've got to stop the live stream, right? Not break the radio and not get totally confused with what I'm doing. And I'm getting confused already with what I'm doing. I'm not too sure what to do here. So what we'll do is we'll keep talking up till 2 o'clock, and hopefully, right, there's this thing that kicks in, right? We should get kicked off, right? We should get kicked off, right?
Okay.
And it'll go straight into English Scots for Yes. That's the theory, right? Okay. So I'm hoping that happens, because we've not got time to put on another jingle, right? We've kind of had it. Not unless I can squeeze some in here. 1 minute. Do you know what?
Or if you want the two of us to talk while you deal with the board in front of you and all the...
You got the...
Do you know what? I've got Leonard Cohen here. Hallelujah. How about that?
I'll let him go. Let him
Right,
sing us out.
Yeah.
Let's right. This might actually. This is the problem, Marlon. Right. Because the 10-minute break note, right? It doesn't recognise the Leonard Cohen song is coming next. So if I boot this, right, it might go straight into English Scots for Yes, which could be a bit of a problem, right? So I'm like, we need to talk.
Okay,
right?
we
need to talk, right? So we've got another minute and
So can
40
I
seconds.
fill
Go
in
for
a little bit more? So I swear at home, except for university student-led radio stations, we don't have anything like IndieLive.radio or IndieLive.net. And I think what you're doing is beautifully done, is so important to this movement. And any way that I can help get the word out. I mean, I did, send out a tweet to my friends on Twitter, and a lot of them are Scots. And I'm sure it's a challenge to develop the listenership that, that you want to have, that you deserve to have. So if there's any other way that I can support that, I think it's such an important...
Well, what we've done is we set up a research department with, the Pensioners for Indy, right, helping us out here, and we're going to set up a promo department at some point, right? So we try and keep it kind of organised and focused. But promo is a big thing. That's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we also need more people to do some content for us. But it's one thing at a time. Getting this going set up, right, and the live streaming and all that. That was an effort, you know. But hopefully, I'm thinking like maybe September we'll have our official. We're going to go live because we're still sitting in the, you know, we're still at the kind of just starting off early days.
So
And we
have
think
an official launch.
Official launch.
Great.
I'm thinking in September. That's what we'll do. So anyway, we're down to 7, 6, 5. Let's see if this works. It might not. Right, 3, 2, 1. Bye, folks.
Bye.